Okay, well, here is a documentary on
He won the
what was
making of a
called, or a man who was called, the fifth Beatle. And his name was George Martin. And this wasn't even in retrospect, even at the time in the 60s. And I remember my father telling me that he was the fifth Beatle, George Martin. And there was even some rhymes or songs about him that people would say in popular culture. And one of the things that has amazed me, I noticed it at the time, but even in retrospect, it's probably amazed me even more, how there were memes, in other words, ideas, popular ideas, things that were in the zeitgeist. It's that German word meaning the spirit or the ghost is Geist of the time. Zeit is time. And they managed to be passed around and get around like wildfire. There was, like the Bush Telegraph or the grapevine. It wasn't a real thing, it was the ether. So people even then recognised that there was some kind of semi-mysterious conduit, like a wireless transmission medium before there was Wi-Fi. That ideas just kind of went around from mind to mind, or they were spoken, or they were on the tips of people's tongues. Right, well, I better get on with this anyway, and I'll sort of let you listen to how he's introduced as well, so that'll set it up like what we're talking about here. And can I put a fine point on it? I'm not sure if I can, but I'm going to try.
most unusual album with the master, Sir George Martin.
To lead a better life, I need my love to be here.
All right, well, I'm not going to play it all, and I'm going to try and only play small segments, for obvious reasons, so that people don't say, oh, I'm ripping things off. Anyway, he introduced him as the master. And I think, that's a very intentionally used word, whether the announcer realises it or not. Master of what exactly? Master of many things. Is he a master of one thing or master of several things? Not just a jack of one thing or a jack of all trades, His trade was specifically in music, but what really? Is it just popular music? Now, he was from a classical music background, but he said that really the Beatles and other popular music of the time is now our classical music, meaning our as in that generation and all subsequent generations. And you'll find that, when people discuss the Beatles, even if they try to do so from a musical theory or notation or breaking down what makes the magic of the Beatles' music, they still can't help feeling emotional connection to certain aspects of things you might like to discuss. And then the conversation kind of tends to go into an argumentative way rather than just a dispassionate dissection of the music from a purely academic point of view, so that there is always this emotional investment. And that's what I'm trying to get at here in a way, because I really do want to try and put a fine point on things. Let's play a little bit more.
Here, making each day of the year.
Well, straight away anyway, I'm just going to stop that again for the obvious reasons. I don't want to be accused of stealing any music or whatever. That's Celine Dion. Beautiful voice. I've known a few girls who had beautiful voices, and they could approach singing like that, and they would practice singing her famous songs because they knew that the degree of difficulty to sing it to the fidelity, approaching something of the accuracy is what I mean by fidelity there. The degree of difficulty was high, and so therefore they'd be kind of showing off their pipes, in other words, if they could get there. So she, regardless of what you think of her politics now, it's just a matter of fact that she was a human with a voice box that was like a finely tuned instrument. And so it's no surprise to see her here. I want to skip forward a little bit and show you an artist you may not have expected, and I know I have underrated. And we'll come back to Celine Dion maybe, so I'll go ahead here. Now there's George Martin. Maybe that he's kind of approving, in the background. So I'm going to say straight away as well, because I want to try and get very too much a fine point on it. I was wondered, like with a movie, a film, what really does a director do? Surely there's the script, the actors just learn their lines and do the script, and the director just points the camera and captures the action. But there's more to it than that. And if you've ever seen a stage director, you can see that they take a much more active involvement in positioning the actors and almost moving them as if they were clay animation people, that he is moulding them and puppeteering them almost, and you can see that the actors on stage are just a slight little bit removed from the puppeteer standing above. I don't know the stage term, but like he's up there where all the stage lights are and above them, and he's holding strings practically. So what does a music producer do? You think, what really does it mean to produce music? What is an impresario, as they sometimes call themselves, or are called by others, Somebody who brings to the public these people and gets the best out of them. He plays these singers as though they are instruments. He is playing them almost. He knows what he wants to hear from them, or he'll know it when he hears it. And I suppose there's a little bit more to it than that. These people themselves are playing their own instruments, in other words, their voice box, but they look for direction to the producer, the director of the music. I'm using the terms interchangeably. And they want to please him. And they're looking to him for direction. What should I do with my voice? So they get to a certain level of skill, and then they're sort of saying, now, what should I do? And I think that there's an avuncular, or perhaps even paternal figure there in George Martin. That the Beatles themselves, being boys, are looking for a father figure, and Celine Dion also wants to please her father. What should I do here? And he says, well, can you do this with your voice? Oh, I can do that, yeah. Or I'll try. I want to please you. So you could say, if you think of it in nice terms, he's bringing out the best in them, and they just want to do the best for him. And if he's smiling, they're smiling, and that'll affect the way the voice comes out. And I'll wait till we get to Goldie Hawn then to say another aspect of it. But I want to skip on now. Let's hear what he says.
Ask all my pals and my heroes to join me on this album. I'm best known, of course, for Beatle music, and so everybody.
So what he's making here is he's sort of making best of the Beatles tunes, but as sung by other people who are singers and others whom you might not expect to be on an album that's like paying tribute to the Beatles' best of songs. I'm going to skip on a bit more anyway. Now there you go, right? So do you see, Jim Carrey, you wouldn't have expected him. Goldie Hawn, you wouldn't have expected her. And you can see this was made in the late 80s, and who's this guy? I forget, but he's important. Now there, Phil Collins from Genesis. I always underrated him. And the main song that I remember is like, his cover of You Can't Hurry Love. Will I dare sing it? No, you'll just have to wait. She said love don't come easy. And it's a game of give and take. Now, when I remember hearing that, and, I'm not a good singer. I can't play by ear. I used to play the piano, or I didn't really used to play the piano. I was taught how to play the piano. And, I did all the grades, of the classical music pieces. But it was like torture for me. But I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of my background here, and that I understand a little bit of the musical notation, a little bit of the theory. And I kind of have some appreciation for what it would be then, because I'll be honest with you, I found it difficult. And I learned how to read sheet music, but not perfectly. Like, you couldn't just put sheet music in front of me and I could just read it as if it was a book, But at the same time, I can't play by ear either. I can't hear a tune and then play it. So I'll need to see the sheet music, go through it, be bad at it for a while, practice, and then I need the sheet music. Like, I kind of need maybe a road map with somebody telling me, oh yeah, I'm not still familiar with the road quite, but here, take a left turn up here, and then after 100 yards, there's a right turn. That's kind of how I use the sheet music, as like a flow to see where I'm kind of going. You see what I mean? So I'm neither nor. I'm trying to explain that I'm not boasting. I'm a bad. It's the opposite. And it's neither a humble brag either. I'm a bad musician. And I'm not even a musician. But I can understand now the skill involved. And when you hear something that just comes out as a pop tune, you think, it's just bubblegum. But it's very carefully crafted to get it down to the 2.5 or 3.5 minutes, roughly, of your average pop tune length. That's finessed and refined and finely honed and finely tuned and gone over like a fine-tooth comb until, as I'm sure you can imagine, like many things you keep going over, you don't even know if it's good anymore. You don't know if what you're singing is just ridiculous, or what you're saying is ridiculous, or if it's all just nonsense. If you keep repeating a word, it starts to lose all meaning. Imagine what it would be like for studio artists, and you're getting some insight into why they'd kind of go a bit crazy as well, and maybe why you need a director or a producer in the booth there. to sort of say, no, this is great, and give you encouragement and say, look, well, just one more time, just stay with this, you know, so to manage the temperament of the artist. But let's hear a little bit of Phil Collins now. Actually, that's not the piece I want to play, and I'm going to skip on until I hear it, and I'll know it now. And this castle, this seems to be where they were recording, and I'm sure it's a famous location where lots of bands have recorded. One of you, I will expect, will know what this place is, and maybe Parlophone Records will give some clue. But I have a feeling Led Zeppelin might have recorded in there, and that they had, or some rock band like that, maybe Jimi Hendrix too, and that they had microphones all over sort of an upper gallery. There was like an I don't know what you call the room, like not exactly an atrium, not exactly a hallway with stairs around, but that kind of thing where you have stairs going up and around, and you've a sort of inner core to the house, or the castle in this case, and so the sound echoes up and around, and maybe the way that the ceilings are designed, it'll come back again, and you get a sound maybe that you could replicate with some kind of digital effect, but back then it would have been more difficult to do that, and either way you'd get a much more natural timbre. And I think timbre or timbre is related to wood, where you get this kind of resonating sound off wood, and all the different nooks and crannies that is much more natural. And the imperfections in everything, the wood, the grain, the fixtures, maybe the way the angles aren't exactly right, that things don't sound too perfect, because you have to have some imperfections in everything for it to be real and natural. I think that seems to be a universal rule. Let's play again and see what we have here.
Kind of thing that become wallpaper music. One of the starting points was working with Phil Collins.
So I'm just going to stop that. I mean, obviously you can watch this documentary yourself, but just the intro to that tune there, you know. And I'm trying to remember like what it was. Is it called In My Life? It might be, because I think that they have documented or titled this documentary In My Life, and I think maybe it is. And I think Phil Collins has a life to look back over as well. And I think even at this period in his life, he was probably going through a divorce. And I seem to remember reading about his personal life that he might have had more than one divorce, but at least one anyway was one where essentially, as far as I remember, his wife really stuck the knife in and twisted it, and there was no reason to do that. He was, as far as you know, I remember, and it's obviously there's two sides to every story, but it seems like that he was doing his best to just be fair about the whole thing, and that at the height of his fame maybe as well, he was trying to finish a record and deal with somebody who he thought loved him and who we thought he loved in return, going out of her way to be spiteful and cruel and inflict as much physical and emotional pain on him, because the emotional pain hurts like a knife, and it's like a lyric that you hear in so many songs because it's true, and we tend not to think that there's much other than a sort of a transient, transitive, fast food type of what they would call bubblegum pop, the kind of thing where you chew for a while and dispose of it, that there's no substance to it. But when you look back on a lot of these things, surprisingly there were, and especially like at the time there was no internet and there was some pop music magazines, but they rarely would have gone in much depth into these people's personal lives. They would have kept it light and breezy, and that's what sells, just a few publicity shots. And they were kind of, if you look back on a lot of them, they were very innocent and naive in their own way, and kind of embarrassing really when you look at them, but that's the way it was. They didn't need to be that sophisticated, but the level of sophistication has gotten much higher these days, and to our detriment, and I think we're reaching a crescendo, and I'm putting in musical terms to say that, like, that things reach a peak and then there must be a dropping off period afterwards, and I think we are getting into, like, in what musical notation might be called either, like in French, a denouement, but that's more like for the culmination of a murder mystery where everything starts to be revealed, or a diminution after the crescendo, or diminuendo, I think maybe is probably better, because it's often in sort of Italian they'll write these words on your musical notation, diminuendo, to let you know that things are going to start tailing off now and start playing a bit more, maybe softer. And every piece of music, more or less, will follow a story arc, just like a story. There's a beginning, middle, and end. And, with a pop song, there's going to be, a little bit of an opener, shorter the better now, to hook you in. There's the hook in the chorus, maybe almost immediately. And then there'll be a bridge, maybe to some other part, and then there'll be a return or a reprise to the main motif or theme of the song, and then the diminuendo, which just could be a studio fade out, to sort of make it fit into a certain timepiece if we can't wrap it up neatly in some kind of coda, which I think is sort of a Latin for a tail, the tail of the snake. And, like a worm or a tail of a snake, or an earworm, those things are intentional, I think, as well. They're designed to burrow into you, and I think we've been dismissing the harm. If I can finish this and get anywhere with it, I'm going to say that it is harmful. We don't realise, because it's like sugar. It's all so lovely going down, as women will say, a moment on the lips, forever on the hips. But an earworm, it's a transient pleasure on the ears. You think that it's just in and out and no harm done, but it stays in your mind. And however they do it, they might not, each practitioner in it, the producer, the director, even George Martin, I might be saying, isn't fully aware, even though I'm saying he is conscious to some degree, that it implants in you and it controls you. How they're able to control you with it, I don't know, and to what end, I don't know. How they're able to make it be a specific control, but they are. Or the end result is like that. And we kind of always dismiss these things as coincidence, that nobody could be as clever to be able to look down the road and see how they could manipulate us, not just gradually over our lifetimes, but over generations. And yet, I think for all of us, people always say, what was it that woke you up one day? And it's a gradual process, but I remember that one of the processes where I was going to say reeling, but not reeling like a studio tape, but reeling again like that, and I've made reference to it before, the zoom in but move the dolly backwards. In other words, the camera is on a trolley, as far as I understand it, on a track, and you push that backwards at the same time as zooming in to achieve this sort of very trippy effect where you feel like you're reeling backwards, but you're so fixated on a point on the horizon or in the distance or in front of you that you zoom into it as you're being pushed back, and it gives you a sort of sense of vertigo. And I think maybe that is where it comes from, that particular, or was made popular or used to greatest effect in Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. So I remember one of the significant moments was when I realised that there is a trick going on, it is intentional, and in addition to that, it is being perpetrated over the course of several generations, that whatever or whoever these people are working for the whatever are aware to a greater or lesser extent, and that there is something in the centre of it all that is aware that it is working over generations, and that's how softly, creepy, catches a monkey. And we are that monkey. I'll speak for myself, I am that monkey. By playing our emotions. And I would make reference to the Pied Piper of Hamelin. I'll just better get that out there in case I don't come back to it. Or if it's not on the screen at the moment, in the form of either a thumbnail or something else. Let's move on with this for a moment.
Phil is such a multi-talented person. I mean, he started life as a great rock drummer with Genesis. And I thought, well, what would be a good...
Again, don't want to get stuck for copyright, but I think this song would be, I don't want to leave you now. Don't want to leave you now. Do, 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 do. In come those orchestral violins, which George Martin brought to the Beatles. And to me, I mean, that is playing, like we talk about the smallest violin in the world representing like the smallest amount of pity. But playing on the heartstrings, the violin, when played right, really gets you. And George Martin has a video, and I don't know if it's video with a girl he was either married to or going out with or in love with at the time. It certainly seems that way. And it captures something about the 70s, and there's maybe it's a garden somewhere. It could be in England. And it makes me, and you might have heard this phrase before, be nostalgic, not just for the time that I never lived in, but a girl I never knew. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? This kind of nostalgia or reminiscence for a time that was effectively over before I was even born, and likely any of you listening now, or many of you at least. Golden slumbers. Isn't that funny? I better say, while I think of it, The Wizard of Oz, follow the yellow brick road. Well, the yellow brick road was obviously the gold standard, and I think people are aware of that, and the fact that that her ruby slippers were originally silver slippers, so that the analogy or reference being made, subtly or otherwise, was to gold and silver standards. But are people as aware, do they think as much about the opium, the field, the poppy field that they were in, and that they were in a slumber? And it was a beautiful place, lovely red poppies. But they couldn't help but feel exhausted. All of them fell down asleep. I can't remember what woke them up. Maybe it was a spell from one of the good witches or something like that. I just don't remember. Or maybe the season changed and the poppies died. I don't know. But that, I think, is absolutely just as important as the gold standard. The idea of being sedated, whether it be by a drug or by music. You know, golden oldies, golden slumbers. We waste our lives away by imagining we're in the movies, and by, I suppose, you know, people talk about the soundtrack to their lives. And I'll mention it while it's in my mind, in case I forget as well, a fellow called Neil Gabler, the soundtrack to our life. And he had he was at least part of a documentary called Life the Movie, starring everyone. So I think the sound and vision, let's see, you know, if we invoke David Bowie for a moment, sound and vision, both of these things are used in this kind of fabrication, a concoction, which they've refined and polished to supplant our ability to live our real lives, because we're dreaming. We have our heads in the clouds with the movies, which we think are just, you know, entertainment. That's all it is. Entertainment is nothing. Doesn't affect us. We're too clever for it to affect us. And the music, la 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 la, at whatever pace they set for us, whatever key or score that they have for us, that changes our mood. I mean, we're aware that apart from smell, just the I was going to say the hearing, the sound of a song in your ears, well, that transports you back in time. It has a hypnotic quality, puts us to sleep, puts us in a trance, golden slumbers. Let's move on with it.
Once there was a way.
It's got a great drum solo in it, and I thought this would be a jolly
Once
good...
there was a way to get back home, you see? Now that's a huge theme, to get back home. Where are we? Now, I'm just going to say, I can feel the hairs in the back of my neck going up, you know? That's how powerful that is, and I wonder if it is for you. I'm going to leave the links for these, you know? Now, I'm very glad I caught that. I will sing a lullaby. That progression there, it's absolutely calculated, even before they had powerful computers. But you can see the sound desk that they had there, absolutely calculated to catch you right in the feels, bring you down and back up again with a sort of a, and I don't know enough musical notation to say this, like whether it's a, you know, minor fifth or major fourth or whatever it is. Well, it sounds like a minor key to me. But it's got the, and I'm sure there are people out there who absolutely know what that is, but it's got a kind of a questioning tone to it. Will I bring you down and back? You know, or maybe I won't, or where are we going? And also, I'm automatically, I can't even help it. I'm pointing down and then up with a slight return with my hand, you know? And you know that conductors are kind of doing this, and he would have done this kind of thing as well. We're probably looking at B-roll here. I want to go live with some of this, but I'm going to have to move on, and I'm running out of time here. Let's just very quickly with this wonderful castle.
It's easy to sing these things when you wrote them. You know, sometimes it's a little difficult to find the right place for it. But it was very enjoyable. Yeah, it was
very
great.
enjoyable. Yeah, it was great. Now I can tell you, right? I don't need to be a psychologist. He's thinking about his wife, who's currently, or has recently, really hurt him. You know, and as men, we cannot admit this, and he certainly doesn't want to let this show on camera. So this is, you know, his covering technique. Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun, actually. Like empty words while he's trying to think of something to say that's actually a little more profound about the music, but he's trying to keep it together. In other words, he's trying to keep it light and breezy for the audience, because on some level he understands that we're putting together a package for the audience, and we need to maintain some level of integrity about the creative process around it and that kind of thing. We're producing a product, and I cannot pollute it too much by letting the floodgates open. This has to be a controlled amount of water we're letting through. Do you know what I mean? Or the audience must essentially implant their own emotional baggage into the song. So you know the way it goes, right? Girls will do it openly, guys will do it but won't admit it. You listen to a song, a tear might flow when you're on your own, because it moves something inside you, and you relate it to something, and you think that it's about you and your relationship with some girl, or vice versa, you know. But in his mind, he's relating it to his relationships, and that's how, I mean, if you can control that emotion and bring it out in your artistry, that's how you make something real and not by the numbers. And that's how I could say with some confidence, it doesn't matter how good AI gets at replicating this, there will be soul missing from it. There will be something of the human quality that is a je ne sais quoi, you know, which is the French is saying, I don't know what it is, but you know when you hear it. Let's move on a good bit, right? Now George Martin goes on about the technicalities and stuff. Let's just hear a bit more of Phil Collins here, right? Because this is again going to catch us in the feels.
Gonna carry that weight a long time.
But look, I'll just I can't resist one more little bit, because I mean this is how analog stuff is, right? To get this effect, just put his hands over his mouth.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I thought we should stick pretty well close to the original.
So I'm going to move on and just, you know, I'd love to stick with Phil Collins, but I've hardly got through this at all. And I'm going to show you something that you wouldn't have expected either. Bobby McFerrin and Robin Williams.
You in his armchair, you can feel his disease come together right now over me.
Now, it's a funny thing, you know, Robin Williams is nearly as bad a singer as I am. It comes out pretty well. And you might say, okay, Bobby McFerrin, yeah, understand. And they talk about how he's able to, back then it was more of a novelty, able to imitate percussion, drums and other things. So like what we see there, it's hard to believe, but even in the 80s, like rap wasn't what it is today, but it wasn't even quite a thing. Although in the 70s they did start something, I can't think of the guy's name. Malcolm McLaren, I think, started it with the skipping beat, and some African-American girls, but they had I say that because they had a real African theme. And I think they brought it to Africa, or maybe brought the girls from, I think it was in New York. I can't remember what sports ball they were playing. It was probably basketball. These African girls who would then, you know, do the skipping rope to keep their fitness level up, and I think they brought them to Africa. To me, that was the start, and I think they well knew it as well with Malcolm McLaren, and it was very, very catchy. And skipping, by the way, skipping rope was a thing in the 70s and the 80s, like hula hoops. You know, people were easily amused then, you might say, but those were two things that were a craze. Skipping rope and the hula hoop, incredible. And roller blades, of course. Not roller blades, just roller skates. I don't think blades had even been invented. Crazy, isn't it? But Robin Williams was big in the 80s, 70s as well, Mork and Mindy. And I think we all know, like, that he was, like many artists, he was a clown, but he was crying inside. He was crying on the inside. Very depressed. But again, looking to the director, to his father, in other words, he would have seen an element of his father in George Martin, and he would have wanted to please him. And is this enough crazy for you? Am I doing this madcap enough, you know? And George Martin talks about, like, you know, allowing the actor to step into the role of the singer. and you'll see later on if we get to it, Goldie Hawn also enjoys. She likens it to a role that she's playing. She's playing the role of a lounge singer, and maybe I'll skip on to that and just finish this off because I'm sort of running out of time. I want to do a live stream at the moment, and I forget that guy's name, but he's very important in the story and to understand what's going on. Like, he's a classical guitarist. As far as I understand it, playing 12-string is more orchestral than 6-string. But I just can't think of his name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And maybe it's an opportunistic time that I've paused that there just to get a good side profile of him. I'll move on anyway. Well, let's hear what he has to say a little bit.
Earlier, that there are different ways of fingering this and tuning the guitar for it. And apparently George Harrison, who I've never met, so I'd like to congratulate him on this lovely song, which I've never had a chance to do. There are different ways of tuning the guitar for it, and they can be played both ways, actually. I hope the way that I've tuned the guitar for it he likes.
Right, a sort of a jazzy version of a hard day's night.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a
Now, can you guess who that is? Do you see who it is already? Well, she's wearing glasses. I suppose she might be looking at some musical notation, or she needs to see... Well, she looks like she's looking at something close. Maybe the lyrics are somehow going below her there. I don't know. But that's Goldie Hawn. I think she's still married to Kurt Russell. Look, who knows? I can't say that I know her, but I think she more or less in a certain way played herself, or played a character, a role. It's wrong to say she played herself. She was able to play a persona that she used in her real life, I think, to great effect in many of her movies. And she's kind of doing this playful thing again where she's a lounge singer. And it allows her to indulge, I imagine, is a fantasy of hers, to be a salubrious lounge singer. Or, what's a better way? Not illustrious, but lugubrious lounge singer. Something along those lines. Something that's slippery, slender, slithery, like a snake. It's got that quality. But I'm not saying that she's venomous necessarily. But, you know, people like that could put you at your ease. And then, you know, if you're in a joint like that, it would ease your wallet open a bit more to have a good night, and you'd spend a lot, and maybe that's why lounge singers were created, you know, just to put you in that lugubrious mood. Maybe I haven't said that word yet. So it's all kind of variations of luxury and salubrious and salacious, and she likes the idea that she could play this role, and so she talks about how she's I mean, to me, it's amazing what a good singer she is. And it shows you how talented these people are, these actors and actresses, you know, that they're often singers as well. Gwyneth Paltrow, to give her dues, she's a good singer as well. And there's lots of others. And Madonna, of course, like, you know, no matter what you think of her now and then, she was a good actress and a good singer. Pretty good, anyway.
You know, I work all day.
And George Martin gives her some great direction, you know.
Because not only is she a beautiful, good-looking woman, but she seems always to be fun.
I'm laughing because he sort of retracts that she's good-looking and says, or retracts that she's beautiful and just says good-looking. He's been through at least one divorce as well, so maybe there was, you know, it's hard to say where he was in his timeline here of his life, but maybe he was just trying to be careful, you know, and sort of act as though he was speaking from more of a circumspect, distanced or distant manner. Like, you know, he's only talking purely from the objective opinion of the aesthetics of her outward appearance, you know. Let's hear what she has to say.
Me singing that song. Certainly I feel it is, but I don't know what every man
I'll go back
feels,
a little bit.
you know that.
And she is a hell of a lot of fun. You can see how lovely she is in the California golden suntan.
Gosh. I mean, that's so funny because I don't know if it's great casting with me singing that song. Certainly I feel it is, but I don't know what every man feels, you know. I mean, would they think that Goldie Hawn should have a song sort of down and dirty? Privately, I can tell you, I think it's a fabulous idea.
So look, I just stop it there as well. And look, I hope men will get an insight into this as well. Like that, she understands the role she's playing and she understands the effect it has on men. And she understands also that because she's playing a role, that she is also given a certain amount of leeway to do whatever, right? She's given some freedom to do whatever, to sort of lose not only her inhibitions, but any scruples that she might have over the effect that it might have over men. Because look, I mean, part of what I want to do is to forewarn men, and then I was going to say boys, but like maybe adolescent teenage boys, that women do learn quite early of the effect that they're able to have, that the capability that they have of essentially leading men around, I'll say by the nose, and they're aware as well that, like the Spider-Man phrase, with great power comes great responsibility. But they want the power and they enjoy it, but they do not want the responsibility, nor the culpability, nor the accountability. And that's not exactly a criticism of women. It's just simply a matter of fact. And it's also a matter of fact that that's the way that all human beings would act. And that if men were women, that the different sort of parameters around the way that the sort of, it's like, if you have different characters in a game and the different skill sets, like say if you have a car and one is better at accelerating and one is better at top speed, people would just use their attributes to the best effect that they can. But they also don't want to be held to account for using them perhaps to get their own way. And women are great, aren't they, for getting their own way by just, turning on the charm a little bit. Difficult if you're a man to turn on the charm all that much, and it, certainly isn't that easy if you're not, tall and good looking. And you can't just sort of say, oh, I'll just act charismatic. That isn't just as easy as, oh, I'll just be confident. And even if you were, it's certainly a lot easier. Let's just say it that way. Certainly a lot easier to be charismatic if you're tall and good looking, handsome and debonair. So this is why she's laughing.
At the moment you're doing, it's been a hard day.
Okay.
And I think it should be, it's been a hard day's night.
Yeah,
it's the
maybe
first statement.
He's sort of saying to her, leave off with the heavy breathing until a little later, Girls know what they do. And I think any girl who's listening now, any woman who's listening now, they know exactly this and could explain it better, but they don't. and the reason for that is because there's just simply no incentives to do that. What do you gain? And I don't remember who said it, but it's a very simple observation, and we could say it, is that he said something along the lines of like, show me the observation and show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. It's a bit like, why taxes exist and why the whole concept of money exists. A huge portion of it, like people say, why don't the Fed just print their own money and just spend it, right? It has to flow through people because that's the control mechanism, and how much of it you allow them to keep or jump through hoops to keep. Then you can put these hoops in certain places if they want to keep a certain amount of their money in back taxes. That's how you can control their behaviour, because it's all about control, not money, not riches. Once you have enough of that, and once you control the creation of that, then you can control human beings. And why do they want to control human beings? Just because they want to. That's it. There doesn't have to be anything further than that. So look, I'll move on a little bit anyway. Let's hear a little bit more maybe.
Everything seems to be right.
And she's a great singer, really great singer, and
frightened of opening my voice up. So, it was just sort of, it was smaller, it was safer, and so forth. But then I started to loosen up, and I could see Georgie liked it better too.
Did you see the little coy smile, right? Do you understand what I mean? She knows exactly what she means by loosen up. She totally understood the double entendre there as well, Pardonnez-moi. What's they say in French? Pretentious, moi, But double entendre, double meaning, or hearing it twice. So you hear it the first time, her voice was loosening up, and then you think about, what else is loosening up? Oh, I see. And then maybe a third time you kind of go, oh, I see. So she knows, but you see, she's been given an opportunity to play a role, adopt a persona, and there'll be no consequence to her because, hey, I was just recording a record and I had to step into a certain character to play the record. It's a bit like acting, only with my voice. So there is a liberating aspect to that. I'm going to use the word Dionysian because, that I think that would be an adjective. to sort of say, like, it's almost like the devil saying, live free. There's no consequences. Because, like, I don't know this for sure, but, like, Dionysus, I think, was on a certain island on the way back from Crete, where, what's his name? Was it Odysseus? No, Hercules, or Heracles. No, Theseus, right. Theseus. After killing the Minotaur, the daughter of the Minoan king of Crete, King Minos, helped him. Ariadne was her name. And she was a spider. She was maybe the goddess of the spider web. Like Ariadne. And she was on the trip back with him to Athens. But there must have been a falling out or whatever. And he decided to put her on this island. I forget the name of the island. Could it have been Mykonos? Could it have been Delos? I don't know. I can't remember. Maybe I'll have another stab at it. Osis. It might have been something like Osis or Osis. I wonder. Anyway, he drops her off on this island. And on the island, I think, was Dionysus. Maybe I'm mixing all that up, but I think so. And he was like the god of hedonism. A bit like the devil. He could have also been like Apollonius, or however you pronounce it. Apollonius. Is that the same as the god Apollo? I don't know for sure. The sun god, I don't know. And this is why I think the whole Christ, Antichrist thing is confusing. Or, you know, Lucifer and Christ is confusing. Right, I've gone off down a rabbit hole. But anyway, she had, at least initially, a great time with Dionysus. Wine, woman, and song is more or less what he's the god of, as far as I understand it. And I can't remember what he's called in the... Well, I think he's called Bacchus in the Roman pantheon. Anyway, this is, you know, the director saying, you're allowed to be a little bit sultry, girl. Where's the shame in it? Bring it out, right? We want to see that. We want to control it. We want to bring it out at the right time. We want to have men wanting to be with you and women wanting to be like you, looking up to you and emulating you.
A Hard Day's Night.
I'll move on.
Was originally...
I'll move on, right? Because, again, all that musical stuff, it's fascinating. But I'll go on, right? I think we've done enough on Goldie Hawn, and I'll just see if there's something at the end. Right, okay, I think with Jim Carrey, it's important maybe to get some of this. You know, to see what an actor he is.
Waiting! I think John's fascination with words, you know,
he's talking about John
many years ago.
But let's just get on now and see. This is I Am the Walrus, right? Again, pick the perfect song for Jim Carrey. And you got to look at it and say, he's good. You have to give him his credit, he's good. And I'll see if I can find a little bit where I can sort of say anything. Anybody who's been watching, you know, the mocking tongue or the all-seeing eye and the top of the pyramid and you know, the voice coming from this, I'll see if I can find the line he kind of says out. See what you read into it. The original video copy is from VHS there, and it's actually, that's what's causing some sound problems, but let's move on a little bit.
I am but mad north and south, but when the wind blows southerly, I can tell a hawk from a handsaw.
I can't remember who he's channeling there, but he's sounding very similar to, and I think it might be that guy in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Maybe that's who he's channeling, something like that. I can't think of that guy's name, but maybe there's somebody else like that, and maybe it was popular in a lot of... You know, again, I'm thinking of Led Zeppelin, but I'm also thinking of, you know, either, what's that mockumentary? It could be the Rootles, but also, what's the one where, like, oh, this amplifier goes up to 11. What was that called? You know that documentary? Good God, I can't think of the name of it now. I'll probably think of it. I'll move on a bit. The mockumentary I'm thinking of, by the way, like, was more or less a take on Led Zeppelin. Kind of like a sort of a satire on any of those bands from the 70s. But maybe Led Zeppelin was the most famous. Oh God, I can't believe I can't think of it. Anyway.
Actually, George asked me to fake my own death. When this album comes out, he wanted me to go out to the house in the country, just disappear for a while.
Now, I would say that is exactly true, but he's smiling while he's saying it, so people think he's joking, just making it up. I'd say that's exactly true, and he maybe suggested to him, could be good for publicity, just disappear for a while, allow the press to think that you're dead, and why they haven't heard from you in a while, you know? And it'll give us good publicity for the album that's coming out. It'll give an air of mystique. Now, that could be just level one of the kind of the plans that are set in motion there. And it's like dominoes. You push one over and you set a cascading effect in motion. Look...
Probably my most favourite Paul McCartney
yeah.
song. Quite difficult to sing because it's got large range and high intervals, but a very, very beautiful, gentle, simple song.
Right, I'll stop it there again. You know, for reasons that maybe the background noise from the tape. It's a VHS tape where it's got the edges frayed, and we're getting that buzzing sound introduced. And so I actually can't bear to listen to that at the same time as the beautiful music. Do I dare sing it? Everything goes. I can't sing it. I can't get in key there correctly. As though I could ever be in key. Do 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 do. That's roughly it. Now I'm going to say here before I forget, right? And here's me laying my cards on the table, and saying as plainly as I can, because a lot of people who are like, you know, truthers, and they want to put like truth out there and blah blah blah, they imply things, and then they want you on the other end to infer things, and then later on they can say, oh, well, I never said that, and that's not what I meant. And people don't want to sound crazy, and people want to imply that they know more than they do, whereas they don't really, and they haven't really refined their own thoughts on what it is, but they want to acquire the prestige of being somebody who is in the know. Do you know what I mean? And I'm here to sort of say, I don't know everything, I'll never will, but it seems to me that all of this, just like the music and the video, it's been nice, but it's all been a distraction from what should have been my life, or our lives. And I think that's the power of it. And to be very specific about what I'm saying here, is that this little tune, this little refrain, very simple, couple of bars, do 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 do. You'll find that, I'm sure, in so many tunes. And again, look, I don't know what the key is there. I'm sure the people who can play by ear will know. But anytime I hear something like this, and I think there's probably, it might be a change between one key and another, or rather two main chords and another, I should say. I'm now trying to go off in my head about keys and CLEF and KEY and QUAI. Maybe I'll get onto that in a second. Okay, but here's what I want to say about this. Something like that, again, there's a quizzical tone to it. I think there's a minor key there. Anytime I hear something sad, I think of it as being minor, but it might be like a flat. Maybe it's E flat major or something. But yeah, I'll just say it, right? So, because again, I wanted to, it's not that I'm afraid to say it, but I was going to start talking about, like, you know, what key is the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's in. I think everything is pretty much real sad A minor, but anyway, I don't know for sure. But again, it's to catch you in the fields. Now, these little tunes, these little ditties, I think that if you went back to Babylon, I think they all come from there. I think they come from the beginning of time. I think they are a gift from a god. They say the devil is in the details. All the details are the numbers. Musical notation really is just numbers. The bars, the beats, how long you hold a note for, the timing of the note, the timing of the bars, and you fit the notes into them, and life goes on to a beat. If it's 4/4 beat or whatever it is, or 16/16, or 4/8, or whatever it might be, you know, it's the beat is constantly going. The metronome is going, right? And the devil might pick up the beat, and then all the people dance. The same as the Pied Piper of Hamelin. He who pays the piper calls the tune, or plays the tune, but he who pays the piper is playing the tune vicariously through the piper. So it may be that there's a devil, in other words, the Pied Piper, but whoever's paying him, maybe the mayor, calls, and like he's the overseer, he calls the tune. So to be in charge and in control of the way that these tunes are played, you control the children of the next generation. And you break the communication between the adults and the children. And what I'm saying is that I think that George Martin here, who I think is, as a matter of public record, or I think it's well known or has been established, is a full Mason or whatever, got up to the 32 or 33 level Mason. But as a fellow I've been talking to sort of says, well, that's just the training wheels, is what you do after that. It's a bit like maybe you get a degree, you get a college degree, and that means nothing until you actually go into the workforce and have a few years experience, can prove your worth, test your mettle. But that's just the background there. He was knighted for his services to, what do they call it? The performing arts, to musical culture, something along those lines. To modern culture, to modern music, he was knighted by the Queen. Exactly to what order? Is it the Knights Templar or what exactly? I don't know. But given that, then he's much more than just a mild-mannered man who looks the part of a sort of very gentlemanly and innocent and almost fuddy-duddy person, of an Englishman. But he's not. He's whoever he was, right? It's difficult. They say not to judge a book by its cover. It gives some clues, but he is disarmingly charming, I think. And you would think that he's not a threat, and he couldn't possibly have any nefarious, malignant or malicious bone in his body. But does he understand? To what extent does he understand the spell that he's casting? I don't know. But and to be very specific now, just to say something again very specific, I think that all of the tunes that you hear are just reimaginings, reworkings, recraftings, restitchings of the basic tunes that have always existed and that were sung in the fields of Babylon as the women worked in the fields among the rushes, where, the baby Moses was found, or his basket was woven out of these rushes, by the Euphrates or the Tigris or wherever. I think these same tunes, these same airs would have carried across the fields there. And I think they've been carried through time. And I think that people like George Martin are aware of this, and they know where the inspiration for these tunes come from, because they're part of our genetic memory. And I think that he knows how to bring them out. I think he understands how to access them. And I think that is where his great skill comes from. And I think it's not something where a lot of artists don't know where their songs come from. I think, Paul McCartney is famous for saying that yesterday just came to him in a dream, and he would keep a pad by him in his sleep. So if he'd wake up, he would write it down, or a dictaphone, and he'd sing into it. Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Ah, now I'm something, and I can't even think of the words. So even if I can get the tune, I can't think of the words right. But again, right, that tune, it gets you right in the feels. And I think that it's possible that Paul McCartney does believe that the story that he said is, did I write that? That's too good of a tune. That must exist already. I couldn't have written that. It's so good, it has to exist already. And I think what I'm saying is that it did, but it hadn't existed for a generation or two, a couple of centuries. It had been forgotten. But I'm saying that George Martin knows how to precede these ideas, right? What does that mean, to precede? In other words, he understands the core of the tune, and he knows how to implant it into somebody else's mind. You hear things in the background, just like you see things in the background, but you don't notice that you see it. And what I'm saying is that with Paul McCartney, I'm prepared to believe that the process was a subconscious process. But with people like George Martin, and why he was knighted, and why he has insight, why he has an illuminated mind, it's conjecture, but I'm surmising, and I'm making a hypothesis that George Martin is aware of where these tunes come from, whether it's a physical vault or whether it is a third eye or some kind of illuminated mind that has enough insight to actually reach back through the generations, through genetic memory, through time, whatever it is, and he has access to this place. Now people might say, oh, the devil can give you access to this vault of all the knowledge of human endeavour throughout the generations. I don't know. Dionysus. Now it's occurring to me, Pan, right, who played the pipes, that hypnotized people in Greek mythology, and I think also was in C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. All these motifs are there because he's able to charm the children of Narnia, and put them into sleep, or put them in stasis in Narnia, freeze them, and there was the lion. And I think the lion comes from Crete. Creta, as far as I understand it, maybe that's still called the capital city of Crete, after the wife of King Minos. I think that city, maybe now it's called Heraklios, or maybe it was then, Heraklios, whether it's spelt with an I or an E, Heracleos or Lios, or Lion, Heraklion. I think the lion, the Leo, is the lion, and that's the lion in C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And that lion rampant that you see on English Monarchy and others, in their royal herald, I think that goes all the way back to the Mediterranean there and the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians, they're so called because they spoke words. Phonetics means to use your voice or to speak. Or to make sounds. Phonics are sounds, of course, right? And isn't it interesting, I thought as well anyway, that Parlophone, the record company that the Beatles and others were on, and that George Martin worked for, Parlophone. Well, parler is to speak in French. Parlo, I speak, maybe is in Greek, I'm imagining, or Latin. If you put an O at the end of something in Latin, it means I speak. And phone is sound. So I speak sound is Parlophone Records. So, people can look at these kind of things. Some people will say, oh, that's just all wishy-washy coincidence around something. Other people will alight on it and say, well, that just proves it. I don't know, but I'm saying that with enough circumstantial evidence, or with enough confluence of data points, a picture does begin to emerge. And the only remaining question is whether these people are being manipulated by a zeitgeist, in other words, a spirit of the times that flows through people. But then if you don't believe in ghosts or spirits or the human beings that we are being animated by spirits, then what you have to start saying is that there is a mens rea, which is like a guilty conscience or an active mind, which is aware of what it's doing and why. So it has a purpose, an objective, and a consciousness about what its motives are and why it's doing what it's doing. Otherwise, all of this is just happening by random chance. And eventually there comes a point where you sort of have to say, all of this just, flowing together by random chance, this confluence of events, and these, all these other multifaceted endeavours that are done by all these people in different studios all around the world, there is a consciousness that is bringing them all together and has brought them all together and has brought us all together to this point in our history and our culture. And I think with that, I'll leave it off and just sort of say, I will also put in the notes Neil Gabler's documentary, a link to it, called, what is it called again? Well, it's about culture being a feedback loop, called Life, the Movie, starring everyone. And there's another title called A World of Our Own, How They Created Hollywood, something like that. So yeah, let's just see what I can find out to play us out, and I'll leave it at that. And if I haven't been, I'd like to just maybe afterwards I might be more specific than I think I have been, but I think I've got it all in there. I am saying exactly that music, just like the Pied Piper, does lull us all into a lullaby. It hypnotizes us, it puts us to sleep, it distracts us from what should be our life purpose. And maybe our life purpose is much more utilitarian than we thought it was. In other words, to protect our nations and to have our own offspring who we communicate to the stories of our generations, that we keep them alive. And we warn them of the outsiders and the importance of creating our own culture and maintaining that. And it's fine to change it with the generations, but as long as it's ours and we created it, because if you allow somebody else to create your culture for you, they can just take it away from you. If they have woven, and I'm going to mix my metaphors here, the tapestry of your life for you, and then it turns into a rug that you're standing on, then they can just whip that rug out from underneath you because they made it. It's not yours. And you never appreciate anything that you didn't make anyway. So they toil away because they know what they're doing. They're going to pull the rug out from underneath you. But you just think, oh, this is just a passing fancy. I can take it or leave it. But when they take it away from you, and it's been years and years and years since you have seen the world through the lens of anything other than the Hollywood cinematographer's lens, coupled with the music producer's auditory stimuli, soundtrack to your life. When the sound and vision is taken away, you're left in a dark room with your own thoughts, and you don't even know what your own thoughts are anymore, and they're frightening to you. Okay, I think I've said that a bit more clearly now as well, or got a bit more in there. Let's see what we can do to play us out here.
You don't get songs like this anymore. And we don't see those anymore. So when he said to me, would you sing that song?
Yeah, and look, she's very French there as well, and all this, you know. Whatever she is now, I mean, she has paid the price, I think, as well, even though she's rich and whatever, you know. With her latest, what's the word, not just agreements, but partnerships with clothing companies and things like this, it's an abomination. But what she said there is true. You don't get songs like this anymore. Back then, you didn't in the 80s, going on to the 90s. And now you certainly don't. So not only do they take it away from you, but they can, if they created it, they can destroy it and turn it to trash. And we're left living in the ruins of a civilization that we thought was ours. Let's hear a little bit. Yeah, no, the buzzing of the VHS tape is intolerable, I'm afraid. We'll have to move on a little bit, but hopefully that's good enough anyway to sort of show that, or prevent me from getting us, you know, any kind of accusations that I'm stealing music here.
Never cared, but to love him is to need him everywhere.
To me, it almost sounds like she said, we're living mercurial, right? So it's very mercurial. Let's see what Jim says. Okay.
Going into this, doing the Beatles, because he was a classical guy, you know, and he thought it was dangerous to go into this. But what's happened is that's become the modern classical music. And so he's still in classical music.
I think knowing that he put together the originals, and you're telling you stories about the originals of why, you know, why John wanted, you know, overdub and why he wanted that kind of reverb. And you go, really? I mean, to have him there to say, that was very interesting. I go, and you were there the first time. That he was there when they put it together gives you a certain, good.
There are certain icons, you know. I mean, we certainly can't look at our heads of state anymore and say, oh, God, I just love them. Who do we honor today, you know? I think we honor great artists, and certainly George is the definitive artist, and of course the Beatles.
Well, maybe that's a point to wrap up on. You know, they're in awe of this guy, basically half a century in the business, probably by this stage. And, well, maybe not, but I mean, maybe that was over his whole career. And interesting that, you know, Goldie Hawn is saying there, you know, well, Jim having the reverence for him, and Goldie Hawn then going on to say, well, our politicians, we don't look up to them. And remember, this was in 1988, not even into the 90s, when people think, oh, the 90s were based. They certainly weren't. Political correctness had taken a hold then, even, for sure. And can we look at any of our artists anymore? Those of us with eyes to see, we can sort of say, no, are very few movie stars. You know, Mel Gibson might be an exception. There might be a couple more. You might sort of say, okay, well, those guys are actually trying to uphold culture and actually say something. They're certainly not just trying to destroy and ruin everything, while trying to, you know, wring the last amount of profits out of stuff, you know. And, you know, so you don't look up to politicians. You certainly don't look up to musicians and film stars anymore, if you've got any sense. So what is there left? That's our culture ruined, and how easy they could destroy it when they created it. You know, they created it to be destroyed. They built us up to knock us down. I suppose I have to wait until the coda.